Welcome to the conversation on the TYT network. Now we're going to talk to one of the good guys that works behind the scenes. And folks like this are super important to getting things done. And I want you to meet some of them. So Zach Malitz has long history. He's co-founder of Real Justice PAC. He is a partner at the Social Practice. He was a field director on the Beto for Texas 2018 Senate run. Don't hold out against him. He's a deputy national digital organizing director on the Bernie 2016 presidential campaign. And they actually did excellent work on the Beto campaign. And now he's one of the co-founders of Beat Abbott PAC. So Zach, welcome to the Young Turks, brother.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah, no problem. So let's talk about the new PAC. What is Beat Abbott PAC?
Yeah, so Texas at the beginning of the coronavirus pandemic was actually doing pretty well. We locked down really early and had cases more or less under control. But Greg Abbott's response to coronavirus since then has been both incompetent and corrupt. He rushed to reopen the state very early, and as a result of that, we've seen surging cases. To date, nearly 10,000 people have died in Texas, over 1,000 of them in the last week. And so, as there's mass outrage over his mishandling of coronavirus, there aren't a lot of political vehicles to take advantage of that. Most elected Democrats in the state right now are busy saving lives, and so they can't hold Greg Abbott accountable. And most Democrats in the state who are working on elections are focused on 2020. So the Beat Abbott PAC is a political home for people who want to start organizing right now to defeat Greg Abbott and to hold him accountable for his failure on coronavirus.
Zach, that's why you're one of the best in the business, because you work ahead of time to make sure we plant the seeds so that we can actually have victory. But let's talk about what you guys are going to do. Where's the money going to go? Because you don't have a candidate right now. So what do you do with that?
That's right. So we're going to build. Our goal is to build a fundraising list that we can then use to raise money for the eventual Democratic nominee. In Texas, there's no limits on campaign contributions. And so any resources that we build inside of the PAC, we can then use on behalf of the eventual Democratic nominee. So whether that's money that we raise, an email list that we build, staff that we hire, anything, essentially we can build a campaign in waiting to aid the eventual Democratic nominee. And like we saw in 2018, Texas is highly competitive if you have the resources to compete statewide. But most Democrats who could run for statewide office will start with very few resources. And so we want to start now to build an infrastructure that can then pivot to supporting whoever the eventual Democratic nominee is.
And so we've got Beto O'Rourke obviously as a possibility, and we got the Castro brothers as possibilities. Anyone else out there that's possible? And do you just wait for the primary to be over and then give it to whoever wins?
That's right. I think it's hard to speculate about who's actually going to run. It's important to remember that when Beto ran for Senate, he wasn't the Beto O'Rourke we know now. Actually, not a lot of people knew about him. He's a relatively unknown member of Congress who came out of nowhere. And so it's very possible that, the person who will, set the state on fire in 2022 is somebody we've never even heard of or very few people have. So, it's hard to speculate. But yeah, this is a general election play. So our goal is to support whoever the eventual Democratic nominee is.
Okay, yeah, and were a lot of progressives who ran in these primaries that are wonderful candidates. Let alone, here, I'll give you a wild possibility. So Adrienne Belz was a Just Democrat last time around. She's running for office again. She's in the general election. I call her the Liberty Bell. Now, people think, well, I don't know that she's got a great chance of winning that race. Well, that's what they said about Cori Bush until she came up and won the race, and now she's a star, right? And so if you have a progressive win, whether it's Adrienne Bell or anyone else, win a surprising race like that, and then come out of the gate as a star in Texas, well, that's a super interesting possibility as well. But let's talk about Greg Abbott, because that's mainly what you're doing here. You're trying to take down Greg Abbott. And so Abbott is more popular than Ted Cruz in Texas, for example. When they ran together, meaning they were on this, in the same election cycle, Cruz only won by 3, but Abbott won by 13. So I know those numbers have changed because of coronavirus, but before we talk about that, talk to me about why Abbott was popular in the first place and more popular than a guy like Cruz.
Yeah, Abbott has largely, stayed above the fray in Texas. His strategy has been to court both the business Republicans in Texas and the culture warriors. And he's done a pretty good job of not getting in the middle of fights between those two factions in the Republican Party. And meanwhile has cultivated an image of competence. Part of what's so important about what's happening right now is that we're seeing that Greg Abbott actually is a completely incompetent leader. His approval ratings for his handling of coronavirus have dropped by double digits over the last couple of months. He's currently underwater at 44% as of a poll last month. And so this is really a pretty significant change in the way that he's being viewed in the state. We're also seeing that he's completely corrupt. The people who have been advising him on reopening Texas are a bunch of campaign donors who he packed his task force to reopen Texas with. And so we're seeing that it's really business interests rather than the concern for Texans health and safety that's driving his response. And I think that's changing the way that people view him now.
Cenk, I think we already got something important out of this interview. Slogan not just for Greg Abbott, but perhaps for the entire Republican Party: incompetent and corrupt. Whereas the Democratic Party is competent and corrupt. I think incompetent and corrupt is worse. I think, but anyway, but that was the veneer that Abbott and a lot of Republicans had. Oh no, well, I'm working with business interests, so I'm competent. No, you never like the Texas governor barely does anything, right? So we never really had a chance to test his competence until there was actually something where you needed a real leader. And on the corruption front, to me, it's always the media. Look, when you take these massive donations, as George Bush did as Republican governor, and Rick Perry did, and then Greg Abbott did, the corruption is really the main thing that defines them and got them in the office in the first place. So, so that leads to the question of, it's interesting that during coronavirus, we're getting past the wall of mainstream media helping establishment politicians, including establishment Republicans like Abbott, in covering up for their corruption and their incompetence. How are we getting past that? Is it just a raw number of people dying around you that people are like, maybe the media is not right about this guy being such a wonderful, competent leader?
I mean, there's so much of our normal politics that's purely symbolic and performative. And under these circumstances, you actually have to do a good job, especially if you're in an executive role like Abbott is, right? The buck stops with you in terms of your response to an emergency that's affecting literally every single American right now. If people aren't getting sick, if they don't know someone who's died, they maybe have lost their job. Certainly they're afraid for their health, and all of us have changed our daily lives as a result of this. So, I think there's a spotlight on people in executive roles in a way that there hasn't been before. And there's a direct relationship between whether they do a good job and how our daily lives are going now. You can see if you have an incompetent, and especially an incompetent Republican governor, things are going a lot worse than they are in states where we have actual bureaucratic competence and where where our leaders aren't trying to kill us.
Yeah, well, look, I'm partly kidding, partly serious when I say that the slogans of the Republican. I'm not at all kidding when I say the slogan of the Republican Party is incompetent and corrupt, but only half kidding when I say the Democrats are competent and corrupt. But actually, competent and corrupt right now is better than incompetent and corrupt because we have an epidemic, and you need competence in order to get the right scientists and doctors, et cetera, to actually work on this, which leads to what happened in Texas. How much do you think that the Republicans have hurt themselves, both in Texas and nationally, with a critical voting bloc, senior citizens, by having guys like Lieutenant Governor in Texas, Dan Patrick, come out and say, who cares, let's just reopen the economy, and if old people die, they die. And that seemed to be a message that Abbott also participated in. And how much did that bring his polling down, and more importantly, how much is it gonna hurt him in the elections? Because senior citizens vote more than anyone else does.
Yeah, I think he'd be really significant. I mean, I think there was certainly an inflection point in the pandemic when the epicenter moved from blue states to red states. And I think we'll probably see the same thing where you have coronavirus just tearing through nursing homes. This could be a real thing where it's no longer symbolic conflict with Democrats who don't live in our community. It's actually Republican policies are affecting me and the people that I know. And as more and more people know somebody who died because of their Republican governor's failure, I think it could significantly change the way that people perceive them. And this is part of what we're trying to do with the Beat Abbott PAC, is make sure that a story is told about who's responsible, so that when people are dying, when people are getting sick, everyone knows who's responsible and who the buck stops with. That it's Greg Abbott who could have prevented this, and it's his fault that people are dying.
Yeah, totally. Look, as an example, if my parents were in a nursing home when this started, I would have gotten them the hell out of there as soon as I could. I'm just keeping it real. Those things, more people died there than anywhere else, all across the country. But the Abbotts of the world told you everything is fine. Don't worry about it. Everything is fine. And if you got that wrong memo, it might have cost your parents their lives. And there's got to be a political price to pay for that, and that's what you guys are trying to do. So last quick thing, Zach, is where can people find Beat Abbott PAC or help?
You can find us online at Beat Abbott with 2 B's and 2 T's, beatabbott.com.
Beatabbott.com. All right, we'll put the links down below in the description box as usual as well. And I know you guys are kings at volunteering and organizing volunteers, so make sure people check that out as well. Zach Malice, thanks for joining us on the Young Turks. Appreciate it, brother.
Thank you.
2 easy ways to follow the Young Turks. One is hit the subscribe button down below, then you're a TYT subscriber. And second is ring the bell. And when you do that on YouTube, you're notified of our videos.